In 1773, the British Parliament passed the Tea Act to rescue the struggling British East India Company. The act allowed the company to sell tea directly to the American colonies, significantly lowering the price and undercutting smuggled Dutch tea. However, the legislation was a Trojan horse. It retained a threepence tax from the 1767 Townshend duties, which Parliament kept solely to assert its right of taxing the Americans without their consent. The American colonists, led by groups like the Sons of Liberty, viewed the act not as a financial benefit, but as a dangerous attack on the fundamental principle of liberty. They saw the tax as a forced test of their submission to parliamentary authority. When ships full of East India Company tea arrived in the colonies in late 1773, a series of widespread and determined protests erupted. The most famous event occurred in Boston, where Governor Thomas Hutchinson's refusal to let the ships leave the harbor led to patriots boarding 3 vessels on December 16, 1773, and dumping over 90,000 pounds of tea into the water. This was celebrated by John Adams as the most magnificent movement of all. But Boston was not alone. In Philadelphia, the arrival of the ship Polly saw Captain Ayers confronted by a committee backed by 8,000 citizens, who convinced him to turn his ship around and sail back to England. In New York, in separate incidents, patriots forced the removal of tea from 2 ships. In one case, the tea was thrown into the sea and the chest set afire in the city as a public declaration of defiance. In Charleston, South Carolina, protesters successfully intimidated merchants, forcing them to store the tea in customs custody rather than sell it. Later, merchants were threatened into personally emptying the tea chest into the river as an oblation to Neptune. In Annapolis, Maryland, in an extreme show of principle, the owners of a ship carrying smuggled tea voluntarily offered to burn the vessel, setting the entire ship alight in the harbor. In Edenton, North Carolina, 50 women, led by Penelope Barker, signed a public letter vowing to boycott tea and British goods, openly putting their names to the protest. The colonial actions demonstrated a remarkable and unified stand against the British government's measures. They successfully prevented the sale of tea nearly everywhere it landed. The British response in 1774 was harsh. Parliament, infuriated by the destruction of property, passed a series of punitive laws known in the colonies as the Intolerable Acts. Far from coercing the Americans into submission, these acts only succeeded in uniting and galvanizing the opposition, irrevocably setting the colonies on the path to armed rebellion.